Hey there, Bevan. So, unfortunately, the filter was very dry this morning. So, same thing, it's leaking down overnight, even with the new cap. So, the oil filter bypass is not the problem. So, in this case, there's two potential valves that could be the issue. It's hard to show because it's dark. Let me see if I can turn my light on a little bit here. Might help. That does help. Okay. So, let's try to show you. There is this mechanism right here. This is where the oil comes up into the oil filter housing and comes from the low pressure pump. So this is supposed to be a one-way valve, and the rubber around it can fail, and that can be, I think this is actually what's going on. Then there's also this piece right here with this guy. Probably see me pushing on it. That's called the anti-drainback valve. Now, when the oil filter is installed correctly, this will be pushed down and basically doesn't allow the oil to drain back. So this is supposed to open when you take the filter out, allow this cavity to empty. And so there's not a bunch of oil in here when you try to put the new filter and it overflows. So that's the only purpose of this guy. But it does drain back to the pan. But because the oil filter's in here and it's pushing on this, this should be closed and it shouldn't be allowing any oil to dump out. So I think that this guy is, again, the fill point, but it is a one-way valve, and I've seen them fail and cause similar issues to what you're dealing with. So what we're going to try to do is I'm going to crank it while closing this, and we're going to see how fast this thing fills up. And the idea is when I'm closing this should be able to retain the oil. And if we're still draining, then we know the one-way valve, the oil fill valve, is the problem. So I'm going to try and do that while showing you on the camera. Not entirely easy to do. So I got my finger on it, and of course I'm doing the starter bypass again. And so we're going to, see how fast this fills up. That'll tell us a little bit, because there's more than likely a pretty large air pocket right now. And again, that's one of the reasons why it takes a while to feed the high pressure oil system. Now, we're not going to start in the engine because at this point we don't want to, but we're just filling the cavity and seeing what happens, okay? All right. It takes forever to fill up, so that is not good. And so I have the drain back valve. Wow, that's just bubbles. I was worried that was metal in there. I have the drain back valve closed. Again, I don't know how long this will take. It could be taking several hours to drain back, but this not. This is definitely this is definitely what's causing your long crank in the morning. So we know that there's a huge amount of bubbles in here, and you saw how long it took to fill up this cavity. This should be very fast, and under ideal conditions, this is already filled when it's been sitting overnight, and should stay filled for at least a month. So anyways, that is why there's just large air cavity. Now, it would be nice if it was just the anti-drainback valve. They're not exactly easy to get. I got to see if I have an extra one lying around somewhere. But that's still cheaper than replacing the low pressure pump. But either way, yeah. So this drain time is quite significant. It's taking a long time, which is good, but it probably explains why it's really more like the next morning, or it has to sit for several hours before you can't start it again, because it has to drain all the way back to the pan. It takes forever to get, or at least up to the pump. Trying to get a marker here to see if there's any way to identify if it is draining down at this point, because obviously if I remove the tool, it will immediately drain down because of the open passage dumping the oil back. It's taking forever, and that's the problem. It's really hard to tell, and I can't necessarily just put this tool here in any way. So I'll show you, if I move the tool, it should drain back pretty fast. And it does, because obviously it's capable of doing so. It's just draining down. So we're going to try and close that off and see what happens. The other thing is the anti-drain back valve rubber also could be shot, and that could be leaking slowly. Clearly it's a slow leak, not fast. So could you work with this and continue to drive it like this? Yes. This won't do damage to the engine. It's just an annoyance like you've been dealing with, which, you know, you spent all this money on diagnostics and things, and come to find out you can just work with it as it is. The fuel pressure, however, that is not a good scenario. And as I mentioned, that can do damage to the injectors. So you don't want that. At this point, in order to fix this oil problem, I would suggest we replace both the anti-drain back valve and the fill valve. Because it's hard to tell which one. And we're going to be right there doing one. It's easy to do both, so you should do both. Getting them is not easy though. So either way, I'll send this video to you and you can let me know what you want to do. Alright, thanks.